All right, let's go back to politics now. Ted Cruz names Carly Fiorina as his pick for vice president.
Carly is brilliant and capable, and yet she experienced the hard scrabble world of being a woman professional in a business world that extracts a price. She is measured. She is serious. She doesn't get overly excited. She doesn't get rattled by whatever is getting thrown at her.
I've had tough fights all my life. Tough fights don't worry me a bit. What matters is the fight worth having? And this is a fight worth having.
The two hit the trail today in Indiana, easy for me to say, where Cruz is camping out until that state's primary next week.
All right, we're going to get to your calls in a second, but for more on this, let's welcome in first Republican strategist Ford O'Connell. Ford, great to talk to you again. Give us one word for your description of Ted Cruz picking Carly Fiorina to be his vice president well before the convention.
Desperate.
You fall in that category of desperate. Will this be
well, smart but desperate?
I mean,
can it be the same thing? I mean, smart, is it going to yield any results?
Well, here's the point. When you're a presidential candidate, you control the narrative 3 times. The day you announce your candidacy, the day you win the nomination, the day you pick your VP. Basically, Donald Trump was running away with the narrative leading into Indiana, and Ted Cruz had to find a way to stop the bleeding, and he's on life support. Now, if he wins Indiana, it'll be worth the pick, but we're going to find out.
All right, we want to get to one of our callers. Todd is standing by. He is in Florida. Todd, what's your question or comment?
My comment is on Donald Trump's foreign policy speech. And, I don't know why we're not concentrating on the specifics of the speech and what he said rather than concentrating on the perceived misconception or mispronunciation of a country. I also think we should compare those to the Democratic foreign policy, which we know has failed and got us into this mess to begin with. We should be concentrating on the framework of his speech.
Todd, let me ask you this. I just want to know, did you like it? Did it impress you?
I thought he was very presidential. I thought he handled it properly, and he brought up the framework and the points that our country is suffering from. I'm a veteran. Our military is being decimated. We cannot proceed internationally with a weak military. We need to show strength. And that's, look at North Korea, look at Russia, look at the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. I mean, we can go on and on. It's a mess.
Todd, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your comment. Ford, I'm sure you listened to Donald Trump's foreign policy speech. What's your take on it? Do you think this helps him sound more presidential?
Well, I think it's a good beginning. It gives you a framework where he's basically telling you he's going to put America first and Americans first over the rest of the world, and he's going to jettison aspects of the Bush foreign policy, and he basically is going to say, hey, NATO, we want to be allies with you, but you're going to have to start paying up because we're not the world's war Uber, if you will. And I believe that the country that Donald Trump mispronounced was Tanzania.
Right, Tanzania. And we were informed earlier by Congressman Chris Stewart of Utah that in Africa they do pronounce it Tanzania, I guess. So,
give him the benefit of the doubt.
But Ford, you know how this works. He's being criticized, Trump is, for not getting into specifics on his foreign policy. But this isn't really the time or place where you want to get dragged into the weeds on something like this. You want to present a broad vision of what your foreign policy is going to be, right?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, John. If he'd gotten down into specifics, the liberal media would have hammered him another way and would have opened everything up. This was about a first try at putting forth a vision and saying, this is where I want to go. And I think he's going to have to do this on a lot of other things, but I think he did a very good job. And a lot of more conservative neocon folks said, hey, I don't agree with every policy, but I like where he's headed. And where he's headed is America power needs to be strong again, and Americans need to be first. And we don't necessarily need to be the world's policeman, but when our interests are affected, we have to go in there and we have to go all the way, and we need to protect our veterans because what's happened over the last 40 years is a shame with them.
All right, let's go back to Indiana. Basketball coaching legend Bob Knight endorsed Donald Trump last night. Who do you think, Ford, will be more influential in the Hoosier state? We were talking about Carly Fiorina or Bob Knight.
Well, let me say this. If your base voter is a white working class voter, I can't find a better stamp of approval than the General Robert Montgomery Knight to make your case for you. He may actually be a Donald Trump clone who coaches basketball as well. So, I mean, he was fantastic. He couldn't have scripted that better from an optics perspective than he did.
You know, you read some of the follow-up today based on Knight's comments. He talked about Harry Truman being the type of president who had I'll leave the blank there, to drop the atomic bomb. But you know, the Washington press corps, they're hitting Bob Knight for not knowing the exact year in which the bomb was dropped. He said 1944, but it was actually 1945. But who cares? More important question, Ford: does Bob Knight have just one red sweater, or does he have like 10
you were going to ask that.
and cycle them through? It's just like he stepped off the court from a Hoosiers game. It was, and I don't know if it was planned or not.
It's his look. It's his brand.
Just as you said, if I'm one of the two, I'd rather have Donald Trump and have Bob Knight in my corner. If it's Indiana, I gotta win.
I absolutely agree with you, and frankly, he's a god in the Hoosier state, and you can't have a better stamp of approval. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, he might even sway some other people in the remaining primary states, because Bob Knight is not someone who runs out there and says, "Oh, I'm behind this candidate," every 5 minutes. And I'll tell you, the other great thing is he called him the most prepared candidate in history. That should actually basically be on a billboard for Donald Trump.
It's true, and I think, you know, the more people you have endorsing you in this year, in this climate, that aren't involved in politics and can get up there and say, I know this guy personally, he's not a politician, I'm not a politician, so people are going to believe that. Nobody wants to believe politicians this election cycle. Ford, one last question for you. If Ted Cruz does lose Indiana, is it all over?
It's a psychological dagger that he can't recover from, because before he was making the argument with Donald Trump, don't confuse momentum with geography. Well, now we're moving to more friendly Cruz territory, and he's rubbing a rabbit's foot right now until next Tuesday, hoping that Wisconsin will strike twice.
All right, Ford O'Connell, great to see you. We'll have you back real soon. Take care.
Well, I'm back real soon. We're going to have him back next.
Oh, right, he's coming back. He's sticking around. I'm
so soon.
thinking about these calls coming up. All right, stick around, Ford. More to come.
Coming up next, we're taking more of your calls. What do you think about Ted Cruz choosing Carly Fiorina as his vice president? Was it a good move, or is it too soon? Tell us now. The number's there on your screen. It's 877 Newsmax. Again, that number is 877 Newsmax.
In his campaign against Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump says he's going to start quoting some of Bernie Sanders' speeches. Against Hillary, he's going to start quoting Sanders. Yeah, which means Trump's opening line will now be, "My nurse is stealing from me."
And welcome back to Newsmax Now. We want to bring back today's roundtable guest, Republican strategist Ford O'Connell. Thanks for sticking around. We're glad that you were able to.
Of course, guys, I miss you.
We miss you. It's been, so long.
All right, let's bring in our first caller, Jeff, who's calling from the great state of Indiana. And Jeff, can we start out by asking you who you voting for next week?
Oh, ever since the start, I've been voting for Trump. Tuesday's our time, and I tried to call in yesterday.
Well, you
made it today.
We appreciate you hanging with us.
That guy, lawyer that was saying Ted Cruz, most of Indiana's for Trump.
Yeah.
Well, the polls show that, and the Bob Knight endorsement, I'm sure, only helps Donald Trump.
He had his scrapes when he was doing basketball, but everybody likes Bobby Knight.
Everybody except Ted Cruz, I'm guessing.
Yeah, right now probably not as much. Ford.
Ted Cruz don't even know what a basketball hoop is.
That might be that might be one of the worst gaffes. A basketball ring. That one's going to come back to haunt him.
What did you think about Carly Fiorina being picked by Ted Cruz?
Well, she already lost once, so why pick another loser? I've been polling the women in Indiana, and they think she's a more of a joke than Hillary.
Wow.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Jeff. It's interesting you say
it. It was hilarious.
It's interesting you say that, because I don't know. I'm sure, like Jeff, I like to poll the women that I know. It's not scientific polling, but women don't seem to make a choice just based on gender. You got to be more than a woman to get a female's vote. At least
Are you asking me because I'm a woman?
Well, you're the only woman amongst us here, so go ahead.
Yes, I will say that is definitely the case, that we do not just vote for somebody because of their sex. And I think, but I will say this, I mean, clearly Ted Cruz is playing the woman's card. I mean, you can't say you're not when part of the reason he picked Carly Fiorina is because she's a woman and she can go after Hillary Clinton in a way that I think a man can't. Ford, do you agree with that?
I do agree with that, and I think that Carly Fiorina is an excellent attack dog against Hillary Clinton, but also understand how dire the stakes are for Cruz. Cruz's biggest problem this entire campaign is that he's a base conservative who couldn't extend his voter reach to moderate and somewhat conservative voters, and realize that that's 2/3 of the party. And when he knocked out, when Ted Cruz basically outlasted the other 15 candidates, he figured if it got down to me and Donald Trump in a one-on-one, they'll come to me. And the problem is they just never picked up the barbecue that Ted Cruz was serving.
And what kind of barbecue is that? Beef or pork?
It's always beef, and you're always going with molasses over vinegar.
Oh, come on, Ford.
Oh, wow. I'm not going to say anything because I'm just, I don't know, from Kansas City, which is kind of barbecue country, but we're going to leave that out. Is Carly going to help him in California, do you think, Ford? Ted Cruz?
Well, you got to understand something. If he loses Indiana, then the spigot of the money is going to be cut off, because you're going to need a lot of money to organize California, and there's a lot of orphan districts and a lot of delegate games you got to play. And frankly, you got to realize asking a Republican to out-organize somebody in California is like saying that a Democrat should try to organize very well in Texas. Good luck.
Yeah, he's a significant
point.
disadvantage. And you mentioned the attack dog versus Hillary Clinton, but they've got to get past Donald Trump first. And based on the callers, we've had a few callers from Indiana. Again, not scientific. Nobody is supporting Ted Cruz, right? We haven't had any callers supporting Ted Cruz. And as Ford mentioned, if Cruz can...
We had a caller yesterday that liked Cruz. We did.
Were they from Indiana?
No.
All right. So that's what this is it. This is it for Ted Cruz. California doesn't mean anything if he can't win Indiana. And it doesn't seem to be...
Go ahead, Ford.
I think that's true. I think that Ted Cruz is actually going to do quite well in the Indianapolis suburbs. I'm not really sure who's going to win, because we don't have a lot of polling, and we don't have a lot of polling on it because of laws in Indiana that don't allow us to run push polls. I think that Trump's going to win Indiana. I'm not absolutely sure, but understand the next set of states that we're going to have till we get to June 7th are not going to be very Trump friendly. But if he can obviously win Indiana, it can be a psychological dagger that allows the opposition to him to lay down and maybe pull some delegates in May that he otherwise wouldn't pull.
I said this yesterday, I'll say it again. It's not necessarily momentum for Trump. It's more like inertia at this point. It's going to be hard to stop him. Ford O'Connell, thanks so much for being with us. As always, great seeing you.
Good seeing you guys.
And if you're trying to get through, be patient with us. The number's there on your screen. Again, it's 877 Newsmax. We'll try to get to your call shortly. Again, that's 877-639-7629. We can't wait to hear from you.